Hey guys, hi everyone. Good morning. Good morning, S25. Good morning, Kumar. Good morning, everyone. I hope I'm audible as well as visible. Am I? Hello, guys. Hi, Ankit, Pramod, Akash, Montal, Shata, Anu, Krish. Good morning, Muhammad. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Yasmant. Good morning. Good morning, Usman. Good morning. Good morning, Adil. Good morning, Kumar. Good morning. Perfect. Walaikum salam, Arbina. Walaikum salam. Good morning, Doha. Perfect. Good morning, Asif. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. So I guess students are joining. We will wait 1 or 2 minutes for other people to join, and then other accordingly we are going to start our session. Walaikum salam. Good morning, Himanshi. Good morning, Manash. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. So we will wait 1 or 2 minutes for other people to join, and then accordingly we are going to start our session. Okay. Today's topic is actually first we are going to divide this session into two parts. Okay. Number one will be related to the asynchronous JavaScript, which is a prerequisite to the backend. Then, in the second half of today's session, we are actually going to start our backend. And I would say both these halves are very important because the entire backend you will be dealing with promises, you will be dealing with asynchronous JavaScript, and the introduction to any topic. Whenever we start any kind of stack, the introductions are always necessary. So before I start our today's session, I request all of you to make sure to take notes. If you take notes, that is the only reason moving. That is the only way moving forward. That's going to help you later on understand and revise concepts properly. So please do that. I can't able to log in. Unfortunately, over there, all the database I lost, so you have to sign up again. And I'm not, creating these links on the variable verse as of now because over there I am working on variable verse website right now. So once I complete that, then I will actually let you know and make you join through the variable verse. So I think students are still joining. It's only 44. Yesterday it was around 80, around 70, and right now it's only 40. So it means half of the students have already left the batch, already left the sessions. So let's hope and let's wait for all of them to join. Okay. I guess we can start our session. There's no point in waiting. So let me start the session. Shall we start, guys? Please give me a quick confirmation before we start our today's session. Shall we start, guys? Good morning, Shobit. Good morning. Shall we start? I want every single student to type yes in the chat. Perfect. Okay, let's start. In our yesterday's session, we discussed few of the very important prerequisites of backend, in which we discussed the basic concepts of programming, basic concepts of JavaScript. We discussed what variables are. We discussed that there are three keywords which we use. That's var, let, and constant. And we also discussed the difference. Now, before I move forward, I want to clarify one thing, which is that when we talk about the difference between var, let, and constant, the difference which we discussed is only 5% of difference. There is one huge difference related to var, let, and constant, which is called scoping. So please make sure you watch the live lecture, which is in your JavaScript playlist on this channel. After that, we discussed data types, we discussed primitive data types, non-primitive data types, we discussed arrays, some methods on it, and some functions. There was one non-primitive data type which was remaining in our previous session, and let's start discussing that, which is called objects. See, in this world, everything is an object. I am an object. This pen that I hold is an object. And if you ask me, I would say the best representation of anything in any entity in this world is to represent it in terms of key value pairs. For example, if you have to explain me, how will you explain me? Name Adfar, age 28, right? Salary XYZ, right? You can say I am able to perform some actions as well. I actually teach. Whether I teach good or not, that's something else, but it's a key value pair. So every object in this universe can be better represented in a key value pair. For example, you have to store this in your memory, this pen. What will you do? You will simply say pen, name pen, features you will write, color black, weight this much. whether it's able to perform any method or not. That's what you are going to do. So object is a real world entity which can be represented in key value pair, and everything can be represented in a key value pair. Now let's suppose, how do we define a key value pair? We simply define a variable, we give it any identifier, whatever we want, then we use curly braces in JavaScript. Then we simply write the key value pairs. Let's suppose the name of this obj is John, age is 30, and maybe there are some other properties. Let's suppose salary over here, salary is 4,000. Now, this is the object that I have created. It's a single variable, it's a single identifier, but it holds key value pairs, right? Now, the question is, if I want to console this particular object, how will I do that? I will simply say console.log obj. And if I execute it, you can clearly see it prints my object over here. But if you remember our last class, we discussed arrays. In order to access a single value out of an array, we use indexing. But in order to access a single property out of object, there are two ways. Number one is we can use dot notation on the object and then the key name, whatever the key name is. Okay. So we can simply go here, write obj.name. And if I try to execute this, you can clearly see it gives me that particular key. I can simply go here, say obj.age, and if I execute it, it will give me also obj.age. This is one way. Second way is if I have to access the same key, instead of using dot notation, I will put a square bracket. Then I will write the key name like this. Both of them mean same. So we can also access a key of any object using the square bracket as well. And later on in the backend, you might see this type of accessing a key of an object very frequently. So please make sure you remember both of these things. You note it down. So if I try to execute it, both actually gives me 30. Now this is an object, right? And there are some properties that you can learn on it, that you can discuss on your own. I want to make you understand one very important thing. You might have heard a lot of time object oriented programming. What does object oriented programming mean? Oops, right? Like everywhere, if you go in an interview, they will ask you, hey, explain oops. What does object oriented programming mean? Please put your definitions in the chat. In the meantime, let me explain. See, why do we actually try to create programs, write instructions? The only agenda is we are writing programming so that we can solve our problems. We can write solutions, we can create problems, write solutions to it through programming. Now, if you try to write the solution of a problem and try to wrap everything using objects, then that paradigm, that way of coding is called object oriented programming. So we try to encapsulate, we try to write everything inside objects, and we create object oriented programming. That's what we mean by object oriented programming. For example, I want to create a method that will print John. Okay. So what am I going to do? I'm simply going to say create a function for it. Now, object oriented programming says it's not necessary that you will simply create key value pairs over there that will simply hold string numbers and primitive data types. No. You can maybe say my name. Give me a minute, guys. Give me a minute. Guys, you have to give me 2 minutes of time. Okay. Actually, there's someone, my car is in the way and I have to, drive that back. So give me 2 minutes only. I will be back. Am I clear? Only 2 minutes. I will be back. Okay. I will be very back quickly. So just give me 2 minutes. Hey guys, hi everyone, welcome back. Hello, hi everyone. I hope I'm audible, right? So I'm so sorry, but give me a minute and then we'll start. Okay, I guess we can start, okay? So we while trying to understand one very important thing, which is called object-oriented programming, okay? Now, when we say object-oriented programming, what does that actually mean? It means that we are trying to drive the entire flow of our entire program via objects. Now, as I said, that the key value pairs that I have, it's not necessary that they will be simply strings and numbers and all those primitive data type or non-primitive data type. But we can also have methods inside objects as well. Now, if let's suppose I want it to print, I want this object to have a method which will simply print what my name is. So what am I going to do? I'm simply going to say create a key value pair in front of which I will define an anonymous function like this. Now, what is it going to do? It's simply going to say console.log this dot name. Now, here's one very important keyword that you can see, which is called this. Now, at this point of time, instead of this, I will use the exact same obj over here. Then I will try to make you understand what this keyword is. Now, what have I done? I have created a key over here, which simply represents the function in which it's simply trying to call the same obj and try to check its property called as name, right? Now, if I go here and if I simply try to say, please and please call my obj dot say my name property like this. And if I try to execute this, you can clearly see it prints John. Now, one very important thing that you might have seen, one of the very important properties of object-oriented programming called as encapsulation. What does encapsulation mean? Encapsulation means wrapping, creating an object and placing everything at one place. So you can see that I have created an object over there and it holds my names as well. It holds my age as well. Not only that, it holds the methods that this object performs. So I am not creating separate logic over there in order to put methods for it. So everything is wrapped under one identifier over there. This is called encapsulation. Okay, placing everything, hiding the complexities of this particular program from the outer world. That's called abstraction. Now, placing everything at one, it's called what's this called? Encapsulation. Now, over here, one very important thing. If you remember, I created over there obj.name, right? But what if I will write this dot name? Okay, this dot name. And if I try to execute this, you can clearly see it still gives me John. So it means whether I put obj or whether I put this keyword, both of them are actually giving me the same output, which is John. So in this case, guys, we need to understand what this keyword means. And this is one of the very important interview questions inside our JavaScript, which is, what do you mean by this keyword in JavaScript? Simply say this points to the object. This keyword will always point to an object. So this keyword is always going to be an object which will refer to the object it belongs to. So in this particular case, I am writing this keyword inside this object. So whatever object is the parent of this keyword, it will point to that. So it means whether you write this over there or the obj, it means one of the same thing. It will point to the object it belongs to. That's what this keyword means. Okay. So this is a simple object that we have. I hope this makes sense. Give me a quick confirmation before I move forward. Am I clear? Do we understand like basic representation of objects? There are a lot of other concepts which we will not discuss at this point of time. But are we clear with our objects? Quickly. Very good. Moving a little bit forward and trying to understand asynchronous JavaScript. Okay. Now, this is something that is a lot of students, a lot of freshers consider it a little bit difficult. But we need to understand that it's not difficult, it's very easy, only if you try to understand it properly step by step. This only use the object. It will always and always point to the object. Now, it depends on where you use it. Tanishka, So this is not CC related to this keyword. There's already an entire 2 hours content created. So at this point of time, just understand that this will point to the object it belongs to, but it depends on where you use it, which I will explain later on in the backend as well. So you don't have to worry about it. Now let's try to understand what asynchronous JavaScript mean before I move forward to asynchronous. And this is something that's very important and interesting. What do you mean by synchronous JavaScript, guys? Because we discussed yesterday a definition of JavaScript, which was synchronous. What does synchronous mean? Synchronous means that let's suppose there are 1,000 lines of code. Synchronous means that second line of code will be executed only when the first line of code is executed. If this is not executed, it is never going to move to the second line of code. That's what synchronous means. Line by line execution will happen. But you guys tell me, do you think for web development, synchronous is the requirement or asynchronous is the requirement? You tell me in the chat. Let me give you a very, very, very simple idea over the simple example. I am trying to write a URL. Then as soon as I wrote a URL, it gave me a response. There's a login page. I wrote email, I wrote password. As soon as I click on login. Now, should my website be that as long as it's not logging in, I should be not able to perform other operations on my website? Is that what should happen? The answer is no. Our requirement is asynchronous. Asynchronous means somehow if this particular code takes 10 seconds of time, my JavaScript should be intelligent enough so that it will tell it, okay, let it take 10 seconds, but give some other thing to it. Let it execute in the background. In the meantime, if this takes 1 second, let this be executed. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? So asynchronous is the requirement for our web applications. We cannot have synchronous only. Synchronous is the pure JavaScript. But when we talk about the real implementation of a website, there will be some operations that I will perform on a website which will take some time. But if they take some time, it does not mean that I should not be able to perform other operations on this website. Does it make any sense? That's what asynchronous means. That if this takes 10 seconds of time, let it take 10 seconds of time. Meanwhile, check whether this will be executed or not, whether this will be executed or not, whether this will be executed or not. That's asynchronous. Now, you might say, no, sir, in our yesterday's class, you said JavaScript is synchronous. So if JavaScript is synchronous, how come we are learning asynchronous? Because when we talk about asynchronous JavaScript, we are not talking about the pure JavaScript. It's impure JavaScript. And always remember, whatever asynchronous JavaScript we write inside our web application, those are called web APIs. They are not pure JavaScript. They are called web APIs. But I think you can figure out that on your own by watching the lecture on asynchronous JavaScript on this. But at this point of time, let me try to make it very easy for you. I have a code which is console.log. Let's suppose it prints 1. Perfect. Then I have console.log. It simply prints 2. And if I execute this, you can clearly see it is synchronously getting executed 1 and 2. Done. But in between, I might use some web APIs. I might use some functions that are supposed to be executed in asynchronous manner. For example, we have a function that's called set timeout. It receives 2 arguments. Number 1 is the function like this, in which it will perform something. Let's suppose it simply performs console.log2. Second argument, it is after how many seconds it should take this. Okay, and let's suppose it is 3. So console.log1 will happen. Then this will be executed. What does it actually mean? It simply means please execute this function after 2000 milliseconds. It means I am giving a 2 seconds delay before it executes this and gives me the output. And then finally execute this. Let's suppose our code that is being executed is always synchronous. It's never asynchronous. Let's assume. In that particular case, how will this be executed? Simply, it will execute this. Then it will execute this, wait for 2 seconds and print 2 in the console. And then finally, it's going to console 3. It is never going to execute this first, then this, right? If we talk about it's synchronous. But that's not what happens. If you try to execute this, you can clearly see 1, 3. And then after 2 seconds, 2 is printed. So can we say it executed this first, then this first, and since it was supposed to take a time and it automatically executed at the end, so this kind of behavior is called asynchronous behavior. Am I clear? Am I clear? Give me a quick confirmation in the chat. Quickly. Done. Moving a little bit forward. Now, there are a lot of things that we need to understand, but I will directly jump to one very important concept. Okay, very important concept. When we try to deal with websites, from websites we will perform actions, right? Maybe I will perform a click, I will perform a double click on buttons, on images, so on and so forth. Then they are supposed to perform an action. Okay, let me talk about the same example which I talked about yesterday. That is, I am simply trying to log in. Please try to understand this. And there are two input fields that I have. Number one is called email. Number two is called password. Okay. And I simply will click on login. Now tell me one thing. Please communicate with me in the chat. I have written my email here. I have written my password here. Now, when I click on login, do you know how much time it's going to take? Yes or no? Is this a synchronous operation that's going to happen over here or asynchronous? What do you think? Do you know, like when I click on login, how much time it's going to take? I would say absolutely not, right? Very good. Why? Because it depends on lot of parameters. Yes or no? Right? So it depends on lot of parameters. Now, when we say lot of parameters, what does it mean? It means that when I click on login, it will try to make a request to the database. In the database, it will try to find out whether this email user exists or not. Then if it exists, then check, compare its password. Then if the password is correct, then return me that user and display the details about that user. So this whole operation that we are talking about here, it is going to take some time. But do you guys tell me, if it takes time, do you think the other part of my application website should not be working? Of course it should be working. So the requirement over here is that whatever this operation is, let it be executed asynchronously. Let it be executed in the background. But at this point of time, whatever other operations I will perform on the same time, they should be also executed. So there's a requirement of asynchronity inside our website. We need asynchronous operations in order to execute them parallelly, you can say concurrently, right? Now, one very important point over there. Another very important question. Now, when I click on login, okay, when you click on login, are you certain that you are going to get user in the return or you are going to get the error? Are you certain that the action that I am trying to perform over there, it will be a success? Are you certain that it will be a failure? What do you think? Are you certain about any of these two things? That when I click on login, it will be 100% logged in? Of course not. When I click on login, I will be able to find the user? Of course not. Right? So when I click on login, I'm also not certain whether I will receive any error or not. So there's no certainty in these operations. It's common, right? Every common person can even understand this. So we are not sure whether it's going to happen, even if I put my email correct email, even if I put my password correct. There are a lot of parameters that might affect my login functionality. Maybe my server is right now crashed. Maybe my network is not properly working, right? It just does not depend on whether the email is correct or password is correct. It depends on a lot of parameters now. So if it depends on a lot of parameters, we can simply say there is no certainty whether the operation that's going to happen over there, this asynchronous operation that's going to happen, whether I will get a success out of it or a failure. Now, don't you think that in this particular case, there is a requirement of a data structure with help of which I will be able to, deal with such kind of situations in an efficient manner? That if the asynchronous operation is success, whatever data you will get over there, please deal with that data properly. if the asynchronous operation is a failure, in that particular case, if it is failure, handle the error properly, right? So let's suppose if the action is success, in that particular case, we are looking for a user. So we are looking that it will return me a data called as user. Now we should have a data structure now with the help of which we will be able to handle this user only if this asynchronous operation is success. Now we also need a data structure if it is failure. It should not crash my application. There should be a proper mechanism with the help of which I should be able to handle the error in my application. Is that correct? Do we need such kind of structure inside our web application? Give me a quick confirmation in the chat. Quickly. Right? And such kind of structure is called promises inside our JavaScript. So we use promises inside our JavaScript only for one condition, when we are trying to make sure that we are handling asynchronous operation and we are not sure whether the asynchronous operation will be a success or failure. Then we simply say if it's a success, whatever you want to do with the data after having this asynchronous operation in success, do that. If it is a failure, handle the error. So for that, we define promises. Now, as of now, let me define a very simple example of promises. Okay, I hope promises are understood, like why we need promises. In order to define a promise, I will simply define a variable called as promise. Okay, you can name it whatever you want. Promise is equals to, I will define a new keyword. Please ignore if you don't know what new keyword is. It's completely okay. You don't have to understand this. Then this promise structure that we have here, it receives an argument, which is a function. So I will simply go define a function like this. And then this function in turn receives two arguments. Number one is resolve, comma, number two is reject. Now, when we try to perform promise, as I said, it has two arguments. It deals with two arguments, either resolve or reject. Now, there's only one possibility. Either when I try to resolve this, when I try to execute this promise, either it will resolve it or it will reject it. Okay. For example, I will simply go say where a is equals to true. Then I will simply write some manual code. If a is true in that particular case, please resolve and resolve the data, resolve user that I have. Else, reject my promise. In that particular case, give me the error. Okay. Now, guys, you guys tell me if I try to execute this, what will be the output of this code? What will be the output of this code if I try to execute this? I have a promise structure. Now, maybe you might be finding, okay, this is very tough syntax. Trust me, you will not use this syntax when we deal with promises. It's a simple structure. I am trying to make you understand what resolve means, what reject means. That's it, nothing else. You will not use this structure in programming. You will not create promises. I have never created promises like this in my real code. Okay, when I try to build a web application. So you don't worry about this. So what will be the output of this code? It will be Ankit says user. Yashwant says resolve, sir. It will be resolve. Is that what will be the output? The answer is it will be nothing in the output. Do you know why? Because over here, let's try to understand it. At this point of time, the output of this code will be nothing. Absolutely nothing. Let's try to understand this code. I am trying to create a data structure, and that data structure is trying to execute a function. Now, in this function, there's a variable which is true. I am telling it if it is true, resolve the user. So the data that it is trying to resolve is the user. It is trying to resolve is user. Then if the A is not true, in that case, reject my data, which is called error. So I am not going to resolve the whole thing, but resolve this data point. But the most important thing is, am I telling it how I will extract the data which is being resolved from this promise? Of course not. I'm simply creating a promise and trying to tell it based on A whether it will resolve or not. I know promise will be resolved, but how will I extract the data that it's resolving? How will I extract the data? It's extracting it is resolving the data user. It is resolving it. Yes, it's resolving it, but I'm not extracting the data from a promise. So over here, we will use a keyword. We will use two methods, and those two methods are very important. Number one is called dot then. Number two is called dot catch. So the promise that I actually have, On this, I will simply use dot then. Now, this dot then is a method which we are going to use to extract the resolved data of a promise. Now, it receives a function as an argument. Okay, like this, like this, like this, like this. And let's suppose I simply say console.log hello. Always remember, on a promise, if promise is getting resolved, if promise is returning resolved, in that case, whatever function of dot then is, it will be executed. So if I try to execute this, you can clearly see it's hello. Why? Because promise is resolving. And on this, since I am using dot, then its function will be executed. But what if I simply make this a false? In that case, is my promise returning a resolve? Of course not. So even if I put a dot then over here, it does not make any sense. If I try to execute this, the output is error. Why? Because it's rejecting. It's rejecting an error. So I'm not getting resolve user in the output. Dot then function will be only executed if my promise is resolving. If my promise is getting rejected, how will I do that? We use dot catch on it. So we will use dot catch over there and pass a function like this, like this, like this. Where I will simply say console.log. Let me simply pass rejected as an console here. Now it simply means this structure. Trust me, if you understand only this much, you have understood entire promises. So it simply means the promise that is you created, if it is resolved, dot then function will be associated with it and will be executed. If the promise that you have created, if it rejects, whatever it rejects, dot catches function will be executed. So if I try to execute this, you can clearly see it is rejected right now. I'm trying to control the error properly. Now look at this one thing. If I don't have dot catch, I am simply handling the resolve part of our web application. If I simply click on execution over here, you can clearly see it gives me an error. It throws an uncaught exception over here, which means it might crash my application. That's why it's very important to catch the error the promise returns. In order to catch the error, we use dot catch keyword. So if I try to execute this, you can clearly see it gives me rejected. Done. Am I clear? Does it make any sense? Give me a quick confirmation in the chat. Very good. Now understand one very important point. The promise that I created over here, it is either resolving or it's rejecting. But what is it resolving? It's resolving this data. What is it rejecting? It's rejecting this data. But when I perform a dot then dot catch, are we able to extract the data out of it? Are we able to extract the data out of it? At this point of time, no. But what if I want to extract the data? I don't want to print a hello. I don't want to print rejected. I want to print exactly what it is resolving. I want to print exactly what it's rejecting. That's what the most important thing is. And for that, always remember the function which you pass the dot, then it receives an argument, whatever you want to name it. I will name it result. Then let me simply go and console the same result. Now, whatever data it will resolve, that will be the result of the function that we have. So if I try to go here and let me make it true, in this particular case, if I try to execute this, you can clearly see user. So remember one very important point, note it down on your rough copy, that if a promise is being resolved, if you are interested in the data, what it's resolving from that promise, then in that case, inside the dot, then the function that you have, pass an argument to it. This argument will be mapped to the data which is being resolved. Similarly, what is the error which is being rejected over here? Also, I will simply have an argument over there. You can name it whatever you want. I will name it ERR and let me try to console it. So if the A is false over here, and if I try to execute this, you can clearly see it's error. Am I clear? Do we have any questions related to promises? Give me a quick confirmation in the chat. Quick confirmation in the chat. Done? Very good. Please make sure you like this video right now if you are enjoying the session. Now, one very important point, which is that when we deal with promises in our web applications, are we going to create a promise like this? The answer is no. We are not going to create a promise like this. Because this looks like a if else, and I know whether it will be resolved or rejected. But it depends on the action we perform. For example, let's suppose we are trying to extract a data. allow me a second. I will try to find an API over there. There is this website which is called official joke api.appspot.com/random joke. Whenever you go onto this URL, you simply, whenever you click on it, it will always generate a new joke every single time. So at this point of time, the joke up setup is, how does a penguin build its house? Some very weird joke, okay? If I try to refresh it, it gives me a new joke. If I try to refresh it, it gives me a new joke, right? Now it's not about joke, it's about this. There is a URL, an API endpoint available on the internet. Whenever you make a GET request on it, it simply gives you an object in return. It gives you this data. Now, you guys tell me in the chat, whenever you go to this API, are you certain it's going to return you the data? Are you certain that how much time it's going to take? Absolutely not. Now, when you perform a GET operation, what does GET operation mean? Let's try to understand first of all. Whenever you go to a URL now, whenever, let's suppose I will go to www.amazon.in. How is it displaying this response? Let's try to understand that first. This is a theoretical concept, and this is introduction to backend. I'm starting the backend, guys. Okay, so please and please pay close attention. I'm starting the backend right now. Let me start with one of the very important concepts, which is when we type URL inside our browser, what does that actually mean? Okay, there are a lot of answers to it from the perspective of web development, from the perspective of networking, but let's try to understand it from the perspective of web development. When we write a URL, let's suppose URL is www.amazon.in. Okay, I'm starting backend now. Okay, please pay attention. And over here we have HTTPS // something like this, right? Then maybe I might have some resources. I want to buy laptops or whatever the resources is, path is, right? What does it actually mean? First of all, URL stands for Uniform Resource Location. Now, me as a common user, this is some text for me. I am typing some random text in the URL, but browser understands it not as a text. This domain that I have, always remember your URL is divided into, if I'm not wrong, 10 parts. But right now we will discuss about three parts. This is called schema, I guess. Please find that on the internet. It's called schema. This is called domain. Okay. And this is called resources or path, whatever you call it. Now, when we talk about this www.amazon.in for a common user, it's a normal string, right? I am trying to say, give me the Amazon website. But for the browser, for the computers, this is not a string, but it's an IP address. But what does IP address actually mean? IP address is an internet protocol address. Every computer in this world have a unique address associated with them, with the help of which you can identify and find that system, find that computer in this world. Similarly, it means that whenever I type www.amazon.in, it does not mean, hey, give me the website. No, although it means that superficially, but over here, I simply mean that please go on the internet, use www, and on the internet, this is the IP address. Find me the computer that has this IP address. So I am trying to find a computer, and that computer is nothing but a server. So I am trying to find a server over here on the internet whose IP address is this particular thing. Now, once you find that computer over there are some files. Please open those files in the browser. Remember, we create our web application. We simply create a file called as index.html. Then we open that in the browser and we get our website. That's what exactly we are doing over here. That we have a computer. That computer has an IP address, which is a server. Over there are some files. Open that, find that file, and open that in my browser. Now, when you open that file, it gives you the response, right? Now, when we talk about this IP addresses domain, there are multiple actions that we can perform. What are those actions? Number one action is that the files that we are interested in, we simply want to read those files. We wanted to read. We don't want to do anything else. We want to see the response. We want to see the read. If we are talking about read only, it's called GET request. What is it? It means I am trying to make a get request on this particular endpoint, on this particular domain. Am I clear? Does it make any sense? Give me a quick confirmation. On the other hand, maybe the files that we have here, on that files, I am trying to create new data, not update data, but create new data. If we are talking about creating new data, it means simply the intention is I will use post request. So on this endpoint, I will try to make a post request. So get is to read the data out of it, and post is to create the data on it. Done. Maybe now creating means creating the entire new data. Now there's another operation which is that I would want to update some data. Now when I talk about updating data, it means there's already some data. I am trying to update it. Maybe I am trying to update my address. I am trying to update my image, profile picture, right? So on and so forth. That type of request is called put request. What is called? Put or patch. It depends on the rules that you use. But as of now, let's talk about put. So it's called a put. So get is to read only. We are not going to create or make any changes. Post is to create new data. Put is that we are trying to update it. On the other hand, maybe I am trying to delete something. For that, the request that we will make is delete. So there are 4 requests, although there are 6, 7, 8, 9. But at this point of time, we talk about 4. Get to read, post to create, put to update, and delete to delete the data. Am I clear? And always remember that whenever you go in a browser and you type any URL over there, on that URL, browser is only capable of making a get request. Unless and until you make it, ask it that, hey, you have to make a post request. By default, on that URL, it will always make get request. How will I find? What are we trying to do? Let me try to tell you. You can simply right click anywhere, go into inspect. Now, once you go into inspect, over here, it opens developer tools. Over here, there's one of the options that's called a network. You can simply go to network. Simply go to URL and make a new request. So if I make a new request over here, it's trying to tell you how many requests you are actually trying to make when you click on enter over there, right? When I click on make a request on this, you can see how many new requests I am trying to create. All those requests you can manage and capture in the network tab of your browser. So you can properly deal with everything. Now over here, there's a link which is called www.amazon.in. When I click on this, what is the type of request that we are making? We are making 200 okay. It's giving me the states for 200 okay, but the request method that we are trying to make is get, right? It's making get request. I hope that makes sense. Now, if I go back to you, this particular API, what does it mean? It means on this endpoint, on this URL, I am trying to make a get request. And when I make a get request, it gives me this data. Now, my question is, are we certain that it's always going to give us the data? Even if the API is working properly? No. There can be errors as well, right? It's possible. Errors might be there, right? How are we going to extract this data inside our code? Over here, this is an asynchronous operation. Like when I make a get request on this API, on this particular endpoint, it's a asynchronous operation. So we are not sure whether it will be a success or a failure. But if it is a success, how are we going to handle the success? If it is a failure, how are we going to handle the failure? Now, first of all, always remember that in order to deal with promises, as I said, we are not going to create a promise like this, but we are going to use proper methods. We are going to perform an operation. They are going to return a promise. Okay. Over here, this API that I actually have, let me try to copy this. Okay. And in this case, I will perform an operation. Let's say I will simply say, first of all, to make a get request on any API, we use fetch method. We can use Axios as well. We can use fetch as well. So I will simply go use fetch method. Okay. Now on this fetch method, I will simply pass the URL, same URL which returns me the data on which you are trying to make a get request. So what am I doing? I'm telling it, please fetch this particular API. Now, when you fetch this particular API, whatever the response is, I will try to store it in a variable called as data. So whenever you want to make a get request, post request, put request, delete request, patch request, any type of request, the method is fetch. Or we can use the external library, it's called Axios, which I will show you later on. But at this point of time, let's stick to proper web API called as fetch. Now, if you look at this particular thing now, this is the data it returns me when I perform get. And the same thing I am performing over here as well. By default, fetch makes get request. Let's try to go and let's try to console my data that we have. Let's try to console it. So in this case, if I try to execute this, I want to see what this method returns when I perform a get request on this in my code. So if I try to execute this, you can clearly see it returns me a promise. But what is the data in it? The data in it is pending. So it returns me a promise. This is what I want to make you understand, that we are not going to deal with promises like this. I will create a promise, maybe in very rare cases. But actually, when we deal with promises, it's an operation that we will actually perform. And once we perform an operation, then the operation will return me a promise, and we have to deal with that. Now, over here, the data inside it is pending. Now, you guys tell me, if we want to extract the pending data of this promise, what is the method that we use? If it is a success, what is it that we are supposed to do? This returns a promise, so data is a promise, and we want to extract the data out of it. So what am I going to do? I am going to use a keyword on it, a method on it, and that method is called dot then, right? Like this. Now, in this dot then, it receives function as an argument, right? Then over here, let me simply go and try to say console.log adfar. At this point of time, if I try to execute it, you can clearly see at this point of time, adfar is in the output. Why? Because I know when I try to make a get request on it, it's a success, because we saw that in the output. Whenever I make a get request, it gives me the data. So it's a success. But am I interested in printing the adfar, or am I interested in printing the data, extracting the data that this promise resolves? What am I interested in? Quickly. I am interested in the data. Very good, right? So what I will do is, for that, I will simply go and pass an argument over here. You can name it whatever you want. Usually either we name it response or result. And let me try to actually console the same result. I am telling it, whenever you try to resolve the promise, whatever data you get out of it, please console that data. So if I try to execute this, you can clearly see it gives me right now an object. It gives me a response. But is this the response that we are interested in? It is resolving it. It is returning me data. But do you think this data is exactly what we have here? The answer is of course not. So we have to implement one another method over here. That is the drawback of fetch. We have to parse it. If you look at this, the data that we actually have, this data is JSON data. Now, I have a simple question for all the students who are new, who are learning this first time. What data structure is this, guys, that it returns me? Give me a quick information. Guys, what is this data structure? Is it an object which we talked about a few seconds back? This type of data is a key value pairs. Very good, Shubham, right? That's what I wanted to hear as well. It's an object. But if you look at the object which we learned a few minutes back, you might be able to remember that those keys were not wrapped in double quotes. So key names were simply directly implemented there, right? So we have a name, we have an age, we have a salary, but I'm not wrapping them in double quotes. So there is another representation of data, and that is this. You can see even key names are wrapped in double quotes. Over here, this is normal string, this is a string, this is a string, this is a number. So values are represented how they are created, but all the keys are represented in double quotes. Whenever you have a data like this, it is called JSON data, JavaScript object notation. Now it is language independent, which means it can be implemented in Python as well. It can be implemented in another programming language as well. So it is simply a lightweight representation of data in a better way. As I said, it's not language dependent. It's not related to JavaScript only. It can be implemented in Python as well. It can be implemented in other programming languages as well. So it's simply a representation. This is how we want to represent our data. It's a very lightweight. Okay. Now, this is the data that we are interested in, which is JSON data. And this is the response that we got. That is why whatever data it returns me over here, in that particular case, we have to implement a method. We have to parse it. We have to implement a middleware called as .json. So let me simply say console.log, the result that you receive. On that, please implement a method called as JSON. Okay. Now, let's see what it gives me in the output. So I have implemented JSON, and my expectation is it will convert this particular data into an object and give me that data. So if I try to execute this, you can clearly see in the console over here, it gives me again promise. So it means that this result was a normal object, but when I implemented JSON on it, it actually returned me another promise. So if there's a promise it returns, it means either we have to resolve it or reject it. So what does that mean? That means we will simply tell it the dot then operation of the first promise. Please tell it return result.json, which means it makes sure that this whole operation returns another promise, which means I have to implement another dot then on it. And in this dot, then I have to resolve it. So function, I will simply go receive a response as an argument here, or whatever you want to name it, and I will simply go and tell it console.log my response. See what's happening here. When I resolved the promise on this data, it gave me the object, but that was not the response I was looking for. So I have to implement .json on it so that I can extract the final object out of it. But it also returns me a promise. So if it returns me a promise, we have to either resolve it or reject it. In order to resolve it, I implemented another dot then on it. And finally, whatever this returns data, I extracted that in the response and consoled it. So now if I try to execute it, you can clearly see over here in the console, I have the same object. But it's an object, it's not JSON. It's an object because JavaScript deals with the object. Am I clear? Am I clear? Yes or no? Give me a quick confirmation in the chat. How we extracted the data from an API. This is how you will use promises inside your JavaScript. Okay, am I clear? Very good. I hope I am clear. Now, one very important point. This data, when I performed this operation, it returned me a promise. Then internally, inside that, when I tried to resolve that promise, I implemented an operation which in turn returned me a promise. So I had to resolve that as well. To resolve it, I implemented another dot then. So whenever you have a scenario like this concept inside JavaScript is called promise chaining. What is it called? Promise chaining. Remember that. It's called promise chaining. Does it make any sense? Promise chaining. Please write it down. Another very important point that you need to write down. Whenever you implement a fetch method, always and always remember, in order to extract the final data out of it, you have to implement promise chaining. You have to implement .json to the first result. Then you have to extract the again and do the same exact thing. It will be always the case. Whenever there's an API, you have to implement the promise chaining. Let's see one another example of any API. So let me go here and let me try to find any API. So is there any API? I think this is the API that we have. This one. I don't know what data it returns me, but it returns me a data related to Bitcoin. Okay, it means whenever you make a GET request on this API, it returns me an object in which there is a key called as data that is an array of objects. If you look at it, maybe you want to create a web application which will display this particular thing in the output. You want to create a website that will display Bitcoin's data in the output in the website. For that, we have to extract the API now. So let's perform the fetch method on this API. Okay, so I will simply say console.log. Over here in this case, I am going to create a website this time because this is very important. Okay, let's not create a website because a lot of students are new and they might get a little bit confused over here. I want to perform the same exact operation. All the new students, especially who are learning it first time, they are going to tell me what I need to do. So data is equals, I will implement a fetch method on the API, which is this. So there's an API. Whenever you make a get request on it, it returns me the Bitcoin data. Okay. Now, in order to extract the data out of it, what is it that I need to do? Quickly tell me the chat. Quickly, guys. Quickly, what I need to do? Jerome says I need to implement promise chaining. Very good. Anyone else? Anyone else? How do I do that? Like what's the method that I will use? I will go write data dot then. So data dot then. Over here, I will pass a function to this as an argument. Then this function receives result or whatever you want to name it. Even you can name it X as well, Y as well. And over here, I will tell it to return what the result that this dot then is extracting and implement dot JSON on it. We know it returns another promise, so we have to resolve that as well. Now over here, it will receive same function as an argument. While it will receive anything, now over here, if I try to say console.log my X, and if I try to execute it, we can clearly see that we got the same data which I received in the output. Same data from the output. I hope this makes sense. Now, one very important point. What if I will create some error over here? I have implemented R in this case, which is not part of the API. So if I try to execute this, it is not going to work. It's going to throw an error, right? It's going to throw an error. So we have not made sure that if there's any issue, how will I handle that error? So for that, please make sure to implement dot catch. So I will simply go say function and then pass an argument X and simply say console.log ERR. Done. So I've catched the error. Right? If I try to now execute this, you can clearly see that it gives me the error properly, which is fetch failed. This is the error it consoles. I hope this makes sense. So with this, we have completed the promises as well. There are two more things that we need to discuss in promises, which is called async and await keyword, but which we will do later on in the backend. But at this point of time, we have completed the prerequisites of our backend. We have understood basic concepts inside our JavaScript. So before we move forward and start our back end and introduction to that, please tell me in the chat, are we clear? Do we have any questions? Especially those students who are learning these kind of things first time. Am I clear? Am I clear? Quickly in the chat, quickly. Perfect. All the students, especially new students, I'm expecting few answers from you in the chat. You're not typing anything. Dot JSON, dot catch won't return the JSON data. See, JSON data, Jerome, is only under one condition when it's a success. If it is not a success, then what was the error which did not allow me to receive the JSON data? So dot catch will display you that error only. Dot catch is for to catch the error if the fetch request is not successful. I hope this makes sense, right? So we will take a break now, break of 10 minutes. And followed that, we are officially going to start our back end introduction to Node.js. And we are going to learn something very important. Introductions are always very important. Remember that. So do not leave the class. Stay here even in the break as well. And after 10 minutes, we are going to start our back end. So see you guys in 10 minutes. Bye. Hey guys, hi everyone, welcome back. Hello, hi Pramod, hi everyone. I hope I'm audible as well as visible. Am I? I think I am, right? Hello, Ankit. Hello, Himanshi. Hi everyone. Hello, guys. Hi everyone. Perfect. Great, 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 great. Yes, I am. Great. Okay. So we will wait 1 or 2 minutes for other people to join, and then we are going to start our back end. See, whatever we discussed in our last 3 hours, all of those, all of that, I would say we already discussed in deep detail in our JavaScript playlist. Okay. So I have not taught you anything new. All those students who are really interested in learning all of this in a very depth level, please go on the same channel where I have uploaded the live session content on JavaScript, where we have discussed this thoroughly. Everything is discussed in deep detail, in proper depth. So please and please, I request all of you to go there and watch those 10 or 12 lectures, not too many lectures. And trust me, if you learn those 12 lectures, you will get all the necessary tools to pass in an interview, to qualify a proper interview related to web development, related to JavaScript, because I have discussed almost everything there. Okay. Now it's time to start our back end. Okay. Even before we start back end, it's very important for us to understand few things. Okay. That why do we use backend, what is backend, and what are the different things that we are going to start with. But before I talk about any concept in our backend, please and please, I request all of you to take proper notes. If you don't take notes, things will be very messy. You can find understanding backend a little bit difficult. Let's go and let's first of all understand what is backend. Okay. See, in our yesterday's session, we discussed that whenever we talk about creating a website, a complete web application, every website is divided into two parts. Number one is called front end part of a website. Number two is called back end part of a website. Now, front end deals with simply the user interface, that part of a website with which a common user can interact, right? Now, backend is that part that makes the website proper functional. It gives it proper meaning, proper logic to it, and the part with which a common user cannot interact with. User even does not know whether it exists or not. Okay, common users, I mean. Now, let's try to understand when we say backend, what does that mean? We talked about a very simple example few seconds back, that whenever I type a URL over there, any URL, for example, www.amazon.in, actually for us it's a normal string, but for computers it's an IP address, which means that it is trying to locate a computer, a server on the internet in this world, and on which we have simply files, and it simply returns those files based on whatever our response or sorry resource or path is. Now we are supposed to build this computer. Now this files that it gives me, this is a response, right? Now the part that we need to understand now is that somehow I have to make sure that the computer, which is in this case server, we call it server, we have to build this server so that the requests from my browser, it properly accepts those requests. It sees inside these requests what is the information that it's asking for, then properly understand and process and evaluate this request over there, then based on it, it is supposed to return a response over there. Now let's suppose, imagine you have built a website in which you are simply writing a URL, you have made a request but you are not getting a response. So it means you have not built a proper server. So our task now, the second half of this entire batch, is actually understanding how to build this proper server in a proper way, then include the proper database in it, and making sure that it accepts requests. We have to create a proper system over there which will process these requests, accept these requests from the browser, and then based on whatever is being asked in that request, it gives me a response. Right? That's something that's very interesting over here. Now, for that particular thing, we use one of the very important things called as Node.js. Now, see, Node.js is first of all, remove this confusion in your mind, from your mind. Node.js is not a programming language. The programming language that we use is JavaScript only. So, what is Node.js? Right? All first of all, every single person over here who is learning first time, especially, please go on the browser and install your Node.js. Please do that. Okay. So go in Google Chrome and install Node.js. So search Node.js, simply execute it and download this if it's Windows. If it's not, then figure out how to download it from this particular option for Mac, for Linux, and for whatever the operating system is. So download it first. Now remember one very important point, that as I said, the programming language that we will use even in the backend is JavaScript only. We are not going to use, like, Node.js is not a programming language. So what is it? Let me tell you. Earlier, when JavaScript was created, there was only one way to test the JavaScript code. There was only one way to execute JavaScript code. And what was that? That was your browser. So in your browser, there was a proper environment, there was a proper engine that every browser has, because of which you will be able to execute your JavaScript. And it makes sense as well, because we want to execute JavaScript from the front end inside the browser only, right? Now, how do we do that? We can simply go to the browser, we can go to the inspect tool, and over here we have console. And in this console, we can simply go and write our commands, whatever our commands are. So where a is equals to 10, and then please execute this a and tell me what its value. So we can execute our JavaScript properly in the browser's console. What does that mean? That means inside browser, it has something installed in it. There's a proper environment that is created inside browser, with help of which we are able to execute our JavaScript properly. So developers decided, why don't we simply extract the same software, same environment, and give it a shape of a software? So simply the same environment which was inside the browser, we simply gave it a shape of a software. And that software is called Node.js. So Node.js is not a programming language, it's an environment. An environment so that we can execute our JavaScript properly. Now, as I said, until that time, we used to only execute our browser inside the browser only. Now, when we took the same environment outside of the browser, we created a software. That software is called Node.js, and every browser has their own Node.js. Has their own JavaScript environments. So JavaScript engines browser-wise. So you can clearly go and see on the internet that for Google Chrome, the engine that is inside the Google Chrome is called Chrome's V8 engine. Similarly, over there, we have other JavaScript engines over there. We have SpiderMonkey and a lot of engines depending on the browser that we use. So SpiderMonkey is a JavaScript engine which is for Mozilla. You can see that. Similarly, we have Chakra, which is the JavaScript engine in Internet Explorer. So remember one very important thing. It's not same engine in every browser. They have their own JavaScript engines with help of which they are able to execute JavaScript inside the browser. Now, when we talk about this Node.js, Node.js uses the environment, the engine of Google Chrome, which is called Chrome's V8 engine. Okay. Now, one very important point which you need to understand, why we are learning Node.js. Okay. Because why we are trying to understand this environment, like why is the backend called as Node.js? Because you need to understand, when we talk about the JavaScript for front end is completely different than JavaScript for backend. Okay, how? Because in front end, we are simply trying to access text, image, and then try to make a change in it, add dynamicality in it. But when we talk about the backend, our entire agenda is that we are trying to write logic, server-side logic, so that we can create servers, we can create proper operations on it. Now, when we say server, what does that mean? What are the operations possible? Operations are, I would want to read file, I would want to open a file, I would want to create a file system, I will want to read the information related to the operating system, related to the path of a file, right? I would want to information related to the server. Now, when we talk about the same server code, we cannot execute the same server code over here inside the console. So it's not like every JavaScript will be executed in the console. No, I cannot write file system handling code over here inside the console. It won't be executed because that's a server side logic. So in order to execute server side logic, what do we need? We need this particular Node.js. I hope this makes sense. Am I clear? Am I clear that we have to understand that JavaScript in front end is little bit different, although the syntax is same, everything is same, but the understanding and implementation is completely different. Because over here we are trying to build the server side logic, not trying to create our web application dynamic in nature. Absolutely not. Okay. Now let's try to understand one very important thing, which is some features of Node.js. Node.js is event driven non-blocking IO structure. What does that mean? As the first is that it's not a programming language, it's an environment to execute our JavaScript, to execute our logic. Number one thing. Second thing is non-blocking event-driven architecture. There are two types of architectures that we can have. One is called blocking architecture. Another one is called non-blocking architecture. Let me give you this whole thing, this whole scenario of how Node.js works using a diagram. Okay, you can find the same diagram on internet as well. And let me try to create it over here. Why do we create servers? So that the website is properly servered to it. Different clients can make a request to it. And then those requests are processed, and based on whatever the request of a particular client is, it gives me the response. So from the browser, we will get client 1 request, client 2 request, and so on and so forth, right? Because at multiple time, we can have n number of requests, because same website can be accessed by n number of clients, right? Now, always remember, this is your Node.js engine. Please understand this. This diagram that I have created, it's your Node.js engine. I'm trying to make you understand the architecture of Node.js. In the Node.js, there's one very important component which is called event queue. What is it called? Event queue. So it's a line, it's a queue. Now in this queue, these requests are aligned one by one. So we will have client 1 request, client 2 request, client 3 requests, so on and so forth. So this event queue's work is only one, which is that it is going to keep all of these requests in a proper queue. Okay. Now after that, these requests are supposed to be executed. Now when we try to execute this request, what is it expecting? It's expecting a response. Now the request, in this request, I will pass it like what I want. What do I want actually? Now what I want as a user can be of two ways. Either it can be blocking in nature, or it can be non-blocking in nature. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? Either it will be blocking or non-blocking. When we say blocking in nature, it means that it is an operation which will take some time. Yes or no? Right? For example, I'm simply trying to make a request on a file. Now, when I try to access a file, in order to access a proper file, it might take some time. Right? It's a blocking in nature. Although there's nothing that we call as blocking, but just to give a context, like we have two types of operations. Now over here, it will be determined whether it's a blocking operation or not. Okay. And if it is not, now there are only two answers to it. Number one is no, number two is yes. If it is blocking, in that particular case, yes. If it is not, in that case, no. Now, if it is not, in that particular case, my event loop, this whole thing is called another component inside our Node.js. It's called event loop or event loop. Okay. Now, over here, if it's non-blocking, in that case, it will simply execute it and it will simply return me the response properly from this Node.js engine. Whatever its files are, it will give me the response. But what if it's blocking in nature? Node.js contains a thread pool. Okay. There's one of the very important concepts inside our Node.js. It's called a thread pool. T1, T2, T4, T3, T4. It depends. There might be more, but it's called a thread pool. Now, what is the agenda of this thread pool? There's a simple agenda of thread pool, that whatever the blocking operations, non-blocking operations are, they all require a specific attention so that they will be executed behind the scenes. So what Node.js does is Node.js dedicates a single thread over there. So we have a single thread over there. From this thread pool, one of the threads will be dedicated this, so that this operation will be executed. And this thread pool is maintained by one of the libraries in Node.js called as libiv library. Libiv library. This library is created by C++ with C++ and JavaScript. You don't have to understand that, but there is a library that maintains all these thread pools, and single-handedly, one by one, if there's a blocking nature in that particular case, one thread is associated for that blocking operation so that it can execute that behind the scenes. So once that thread returns all of those things, then in this case, it simply returns me the response like this, whatever its response is. To properly understand this same image, let us understand in a better way. So you can simply go to internet and you can simply search Node.js working over here. Now in the images, you can see a lot of good images, but the image that I'm actually interested is in this. Okay. If you look at this particular image on LinkedIn, someone has pasted it, I guess. This one. Look at this. How does Node.js work? Please pay close attention. Let me try to zoom it a little bit. One of the very fantastic images that can explain you what Node.js is. From client 1, a request 1 will come. From client 2, request 2 will come, so on and so forth. All those requests are placed in a component inside Node.js called as event queue. So event, there's one very important structure inside, important component on inside our Node.js called as event loop. Now, event loop is responsible for taking the requests from the event queue one by one. So all those requests are placed in event queue, request 1, request 2, request 3, request 4, request n. One by one, event loop actually over here picks up the request from the event queue. And event loop is responsible for executing this particular request. Now, see what happens. If you look at this, there can be two possibilities now. Either it's a blocking IO request or not. If it is not, in that particular case, simply send the response, because since it's not blocking, it will properly execute and return. Done. But what if it is a blocking nature? In that particular case, each blocking request is handled by the threads from the thread pool. So over there, this live will maintain this thread pool over here, and one of the threads are associated for that request, which is blocking in nature. So once this thread pool executes, understands this properly, it executes it behind the scenes over there. Then whatever its response is, it sends it to event loop, and event loop gives me the response over there. But it still checks whether it is still blocking or not. If it is still blocking, it again will go to the thread pool and execute it. So it will keep executing it until it does not become a non-blocking and returns a proper response. So this is how Node.js internally work. This environment, it receives requests from the client one by one over there based on this event-driven structure over there, that it receives requests and then places those requests in the event queue one by one. Event loop takes the requests and determines whether it's a blocking or non-blocking. If it is blocking, in that particular case, send it to the thread pool and dedicate one thread for the each request so that it will be executed properly and made sure it's now non-blocking. And if it's non-blocking, send the response. I need a quick confirmation in the chat whether we understood this or not. The internal working of Node.js. Quickly. Quickly, guys, quickly. Done, everyone? Every single person must reply. Please make sure you like this video right now if you're enjoying the concepts over there, if you're enjoying the session, okay? Please do that. Okay, so this is exactly what you have. So please, but confusion. What's the confusion? If you have any confusion, please put that question in the chat. So we have one of the very important, as I said, it is non-blocking in nature, which means it's not going to block. Non-blocking nature, if you have not understood, let me try to explain it within example. Let's suppose I have n number of code over here. Okay, explain thread, allow me a second. Let's suppose over here we have simply n number of codes over here. Now let's suppose over here it's performing something, and over here my server is handling a file transfer. Now, when I talk about file transfer, is it blocking in nature or non-blocking in nature? Can anyone tell me? Is it blocking or non-blocking in nature? Tell me in the chat quickly. Quickly. So when we talk about file transfer, very good. It is blocking in nature because we don't know how much time it's going to take. But let's suppose it takes 10 minutes to transfer the file. Do you think this particular line will wait 10 minutes? The answer is no. So in this particular case, for this node just associates a thread. Okay. Node just associates a thread to it. Now, when we say thread, what does that mean? See, those are in the thread pools, we have n number of units created. So T1 thread unit, T2 thread unit, T3 thread unit, T4 thread unit, so on and so forth. Now, when we talk about thread, each thread over there is created so that they are able to execute the code. If that thread is able to execute the code, we say it's a thread. So whatever part of a Node.js engine is capable of executing a code, we say it's simply a thread. Am I clear? I hope that answers your question. Mir Yasin, right? So if it is capable of executing a code, that part of a Node.js engine is called a thread. So thread there is a proper code written for each thread. Let's see, when we see a thread pool, remember, it's not like a hardware, it's a software. It is written in C++, it is written in JavaScript. Okay. So this thread pool is nothing but a library created. The library is called a library written in C++. And each thread is on its own is capable of executing a code. But when we say, see, over here, according to this particular diagram, let's understand one thing. When we have our request, there are two possibilities. Please try to understand this, why we need thread pool. Over here, there are two possibilities: blocking operation, non-blocking operation, right? If it is blocking operation, if there's only one thread which is already associated with this particular part, if there's only one thread, don't you think it will actually waste the time for executing the blocking operation entirely? What is our intention? Our intention is, if this line of code takes 10 minutes of time, let it execute in the background, but on the same time, let this execute it as well. So the thread that we have, it's already part of this. The thread that we have, it's already executing this. So we need other threads over there which will handle this in the background. Does it make any sense, Mir Yasin, especially to you? We need threads now that will execute this in the background. If there's any other blocking operation, we need another thread that will actually execute this in the background. So that's what we mean by thread pools. They have the capability of executing the code. Right? I hope this makes sense. Moving a little bit forward. So this is non-blocking nature. Now, there are a lot of theoretical concepts that we can discuss inside our Node.js, which we will eventually discuss one by one. At this point of time, let's try to implement some code to some extent, especially a code that we use inside our backend. I'm not going to create an array, then implement supplies on it and all those methods which we do. We won't do that. I'm not going to tell it, hey, please access h1 tag and do this. No. But there is a proper mechanism. When we talk about backend, imagine backend. Backend simply means that I have to create a server. That server will accept requests. Then it will process it. When we say process, it means whatever this request is asking for. In that, I can simply access resources from the database. I can create resources in the database. Maybe I can update resources in the database, or maybe I am trying to access a file handling, path handling, operating system handling, database handling, so on and so forth. Once it does all of that, it executes the business logic. Then it should be able to send the response. So this is the whole backend that we are trying to build over here, right? Now imagine we are building this. Are we going to learn or implement the code that we have? No. There's one very important concept inside our Node.js, which is called modules. Always remember that whenever you install Node.js inside your laptop, inside your local system, it also installs the package manager. It gives you access to a package manager, and that is called npm, which stands for Node Package Manager. So when we talk about Node Package Manager, it is nothing but world's one of the largest software registry available on the internet, with help of which you can install different packages, different softwares in your system. So when we install Node.js, it gives you Node Package Manager with it. With help of this Node Package Manager, you can actually install softwares. You can install packages in your system. If I'm not wrong, this package manager holds more than 7 lakh softwares within its registry. One of the world's largest registry that we have. Okay. Now, when we talk about our Node.js, what do we need? We need database modules. We need file modules. We need path operating modules. We need operating system modules. We need event modules. So we need different modules with help of which we can actually build our logic, right? Now modules are of three types. You can note it down. Number one is called core modules. Number two is called local modules. Number three is called third party modules. So we have three types of modules that we will be implementing inside our Node.js. Number one is called core modules. Number two is called local modules. Number three is called third party modules. What do we mean by core modules? What do we mean by local modules? What do we mean by third party modules? Let's try to understand that. When we talk about this environment Node.js, it is supposed to execute our JavaScript. It's an environment. There are some modules which we use inside our backend, which are already part of Node.js. So in order to implement their functionalities, we don't have to install anything external. So we just write the code, Node.js automatically executes it because they are part of the Node.js. So they are built in the Node.js. Such type of modules are called core modules, built-in modules. We have another name for them, that these modules are built-in modules. They're already part of the Node.js environment. Okay. Second type of modules is called local modules. For example, I need what's a module? Module is nothing but a function, but a package of a code which we can create on our own as well, depending on our requirement. For example, I have to create a calculator. So I will simply create a function which will perform addition, which will perform subtraction, which will perform multiplication. And then whenever I need, I will simply call those modules, call those packages. So if I create something of my own, user-defined functions, user-defined modules, such type of modules inside our backend are called local modules. I hope this makes sense. Now, after that, there are a lot of requirements inside our Node.js in which we have to install external resources, external modules from Node Package Manager. So we use npm to install them. And such type of modules are called third-party modules. So we have to install them. And one of the very famous modules which we will learn inside our backend is called Express.js. What is it called? Express.js. So Express.js is a third-party module. As of now, let's go to our code and let's learn one very important module so that you can actually take some code with you for today's session, which is called file system. So I will create a folder called as file, or let me create a folder with fs. Now, in this particular fs module, we are going to learn with help of Node.js, how can we actually deal with the files that are part of that particular server. So maybe I want to read a file. I want to create a file. I want to update a file. I want to delete a file. So we will perform CRUD operation. CRUD operation. CRUD. Where C stands for creation, R stands for read, U stands for update, D stands for delete. So this is what we want to perform on the files. Over here, for that, I will simply create a file with the name of index.js. Now it's a JavaScript file. So I can simply write up my JavaScript code over the, let's suppose I will simply say alpha, right? Now, in order to execute this particular code, what I will do is I will simply click on this. This is one way of executing any JavaScript file using my code runner. But I can also execute this code with help of a Node.js terminal as well. Right now, this index.js, is this part of my backend or is this part of my fs? It is inside fs folder. But right now, my terminal control is in backend. So what I will do is I will simply say cd, change directory to fs folder. Now, when I change in my directory to fs, now my control is in fs. So whatever commands I will execute over it will be executed inside the fs folder. In order to execute my index.js using Node, I will simply say Node index.js like this. If I click enter, it gives me alpha. I hope this makes sense. Now, I'm not here to print alpha or console alpha, but what am I here for? See, we are going to learn, first of all, our this class and next class will be for our code modules. In our next class only, we are going to learn how to create our servers. In the next module only. We're not going to waste too much time on core modules. Reason is we don't use that many core modules inside our backend setup right now, current days. We used to use it in early days when we do not had that much modules. But I will show you still at least 3 to 4 core modules. And using a core module, how can we build a server, which we will discuss in our next class. But when we talk about core module, what does it mean? That this module is already part of the Node.js environment, which means I have to import it with help of something now. In order to import any module from your Node.js or any module later on as well, we use a method, and that method is called a require method. So inside backend, the first method which you are going to learn is require method. So we simply will use require, and over here we will simply pass the module name, whatever the module name which we want to import. So require is the method with the help of which we can simply import the module inside our backend environment, which is in this case FS folder. So I will simply go here and I will simply say constant FS is equals to, I would simply want you to require. Require what? A module whose name is FS. Now at this point of time, you guys tell me, have I installed FS? Of course not. So how does it know FS there? It knows because it is part of the Node.js engine. And in my system, I have Node.js installed. So it already knows that there is a module inside my system whose name is FS. So I have to import it. I have to require it, whatever its functionalities are. So if I try to execute my FS over there like this, and now if I try to execute my Node.js engine, you can clearly see it gives me a complete set of methods over there with help of which I can actually deal with the files over there. So when I required FS, I did not import it, I did not install it externally, but it is already part of Node.js engine. So when I say required FS, it automatically knows. Why? Because I have Node.js installed. And when I try to console the same FS variable, it gave me an object where there are methods: append file, sync, access sync, and number of methods which even I don't know because I don't use them that much. But there are some methods which we will actually use. Okay, I hope this makes sense. Now let's suppose there is a file over here inside this. The name of the file is adfer.txt. Okay. Please make sure you subscribe to the channel if you have not already. Okay. Why function are inside the array? Because that's how they are created, right? That's how they are created. It's not like, you need to understand that there are core models. Whatever their logic is, it's already created, right? If you create your own local model, in that case, see what how you will create it, but it's already created, right? Now in this adfer.txt, I will simply say, please subscribe to variable verse, right? This is the text. Now somehow there's a requirement inside my application in which I want this particular backend environment to implement a logic and read this file. Now, when we say read, can we say it's a file system operation? Yes or no? In order to read a file, can we say it's a file system operation? The answer is, of course, yes, it's a file system operation, right? And when we talk about file system operation, the module that we will actually link to is FS module. I hope that makes sense. So for that, I will simply say inside FS, there is a method which is called read file sync. What does sync mean? I will tell you that. At this point of time, just understand read file sync is a method with the help of which we can read the content of a file from the database. Now over here, it receives multiple arguments. Number one is the path of that particular file which we want to read. So I can simply go /adfer.txt. / means in the current folder, there is a adfer.txt, please read it. Now let's suppose let me go here and let me try to store it in a variable. So let my data is equals to this. So if you look at this adfer.txt, it says please subscribe to my variable verse. And over here, the function which I am using is fs.readFileSync. I am passing the path. So when I say console.data over there, it must give me this particular data, but it won't. Because there's one very important thing that you need to understand. This particular thing is in text, is in string format. Read file sync or Node.js is a computer environment with help of which it's going to execute this code. So it is going to read it, but it's going to read it in a specific format which computers understand. That's why if I simply go say node index.js, you can clearly see it gives me the data in the buffer format, in a format which it understands, which we won't understand. But we are not interested in that. We are interested in reading the file as the content looks like, right? Now over here, in order to do that, we can simply go and use a method called as toString. Okay, toString like this. Whatever this data is, whatever you have understood it in, please convert that into a string. So if I go and execute this particular code, you can clearly see it gives me please subscribe to variable verse, right? Another very important thing is instead of using toString, this read file sync receives one another argument, and that is my UTF-8. UTF-8. So we have number one is the text, part of that file which we want to read. Number two is we use an argument called as UTF-8. What does UTF-8 stand for? It stands for some format, Unicode UTF-8. It is a format which we use with help of which we will be able to encode our characters. Okay. It simply has a very huge data set where it knows this character is represented like this in computers, this character is represented like this in computers. So it understands properly this particular thing. So that's why when we implement UTF-8 over there, I am telling it, please, whatever the format is, however it's represented, give me the exact same data. So in this case, if I try to execute, you can still see it says please subscribe to variable verse. Now over here, what have we done? We have actually read the content of a file using a module of Node.js. Did we ever do such kind of operation inside our front end, inside our JavaScript, normal JavaScript? The answer is no. We have not done. So this is something very special here, that we are using modules and then we are simply using. UTF-8 is not a metadata. It's simply a character encoding technique. Now, let me tell you why you said metadata, because I think you have a confusion that whenever we create a file, let's suppose I will create a file index.html, and if we create boilerplate of this, you can see over here UTF-8. So you might think that it's a meta tag, right? Why do we use meta tag? Let me give a simple example over here. In this particular case, I will simply put a h1 tag. I want it to display that whenever a website will be created, I want it to display a emoji. Okay, an emoji that somehow looks like this. Okay, but how does my website know that emoji is what I want to display in the output? So it simply uses the UTF-8 over here to properly understand it and display it in a proper way. If we don't use it, there is a possibility. Although right now it does not work like that, it will still display hearts. But I'm trying to tell you the usage of UTF-8. So over here, even if I write over here some text in Hindi, some French, some France, or whatever text, how does it make sure that whatever content I will put in the tags inside my website, the same way it's displayed in the browser? We use UTF-8 encoding technique for the same. I hope UTF-8 is understood. That's what we are doing here. Can we read the same content from index.html? So if I go to index.html over there, I want to read the content of it. So if I try to right now execute the same content here, and in this case, if I go here at the top, you can clearly see I am able to even read the content of HTML as well. Okay. So we, with help of a module, are able to read the content of our files. Now, what if I want to create? Because reading is done. Now let's talk about creation. Similarly, we have a method of fs which is called write file sync. Okay. In this, I will simply tell it what file you want to create. So I will simply say create a file which is variable.txt or HTML, in which the content that I wanted to place it, hello, welcome, like this. So what I want to do is I simply wanted to do create a file in the current folder, which is fs in this case. Create variable.txt in which you are going to simply write this content. But how will it work? See, this is how it's going to work. It's simply going to check that in my current repository, is there any file with the name of variable.txt? If it is not, create a new file and put this text. But if it is already there, then in that case, whatever its currently is, replace that current text with this, current content with this. So now if I try to execute this, let me try to comment this because I don't want to read and display it. So now if I go here and try to execute this, you can clearly see a file got created inside my folder, which is variable.txt. And if I try to execute this, you can clearly see it is hello welcome over here. Now, if I simply want to add some more text, let's say hello welcome, hey something, right? If I try to execute this, you can clearly see now variable text contains this text, right? So this whole thing that we are doing is it's called file handling. Exactly. It's called file handling because we are trying to handle some file. So with write file sync, every single time it's going to create this file. If it's already created, override it with this content. I hope this also makes sense. Now, one of the very important things is that we have read the file, we have created the file. What if we want to update the content? At this point of time, I simply want that a file to be created. Hello, welcome, hey should be already there. It should simply add content, please like. So to this file that I have, it should keep this content over there. Keep this content over there, then add it. But at this point of time, if I try to execute it, it's not going to keep the content previously there, but it's going to replace it. So how do we do that? Of course, for that, we will simply go to, let me try to comment this and we will simply see fs.append file sync. What is the file that it needs to append? The file name is, we will talk about the current variable. So let me use /variable.txt, and the content that I want it to append is Adfar sir is best. So now if I try to execute this over here, it means on this particular file, whatever its current text is, keep it there, but append this particular text at the end. So in this case, if I try to execute this, you can clearly see it says please like, and then Adfar sir is the best, right? So we have append file sync. If I go here now, similarly, let me try to say console.log fs here. And if I try to execute my code, you can clearly see there are a lot of methods which you can use, with help of which you can do a proper file handling inside your backend. And was there any way to do the same thing in our browser's console, in our front-end JavaScript? Guys, give me the answer to that in the chat. Yes or no? Of course not, right? Of course not. This code cannot be executed in the browser. Like it's part of the Node.js engine. So we need an environment, and we have installed our environment. And there are some other concepts related to file system and what this sync means. We will discuss that in our next class. Questions, sir? Please ask. Please put in the chat. So as of now, we have understood the basic functionality of Node.js, and also not only that, we have understood like how Node.js works. For that, we understood a small diagram. Please download the diagram from the internet as well, which I showed you from that LinkedIn profile. One of the best diagrams to explain how Node.js works. So let me share the addends form link in the chat so that you can mark the addends. Okay. And one very important request to all of you. Okay. Give me a second. Let me try to stop presenting the screen and let me share the addends link. So allow me a second. Addends form. And let me share it in the chat. So I'm confirming this. So let me share it, the addends link. I have shared the addends link. Please make sure you mark your addends, okay? Now, one very important thing over here, that there are some students which I saw joined in the last 10 minutes. Even if you mark your addends, it won't make any sense. Even if I tell you that your addends is 100%, it won't make any sense. I know the students who are active in the chat, and I completely monitor that as well. So I track every data. There's already a team member in the class who is tracking every data. So if you join in the last 5 minutes just to mark the addends, it won't serve anything. Please don't do that. Another small request is the content that I am giving you, trust me, it's a very premium content. You will not find such content on anywhere on the YouTube for free. You will find better content than this, but you have to pay money. And since I am doing this because my intention is very pure over here, I would still request you to please put the comments at the end later on once the class is done. Yesterday we completed a class, there are only 3 comments on. And I can see there are 40 to 50 students active in the class. So please make sure you put a valuable comment at the end. Okay. And your full name. Always remember classroom ID is your full name. Okay, your full name. I will create the classroom this week and I will share it with you. So I request all of you to please make sure that once this live stream is done, share this video within your network, because if you feel that this is like something that's good, so if someone can benefit from this, please make sure to share it with them. Another very important thing is once this lecture is done, I request all of you to please comment over there in the previous class on this as well, so that other will automatically get to know like whether it was a good class or not. Okay, am I clear? Am I clear? Do we have any questions? Everyone, please put yes or no in the chat. Do we have any questions? In our next class, which will be taking place on Saturday, hopefully, and next class will be coming Saturday. Yes, coming Saturday. In that, we are going to build our first server. Our servers in the next week, we will build our first server using Node.js first. Then we will shift to Express.js, and in next few weeks, we are going to properly understand how everything works. Okay, 6 p.m. in the evening. Yes. Classroom ID is your full name, the name, your full name that you have, first name, last name, middle name. Okay, that's your classroom ID. Full name. Thank you guys. Bye everyone. I hope you have enjoyed the session. Fred Pool, sir, I have to continue with the group project. We will start working on the group projects this week. Some projects, some groups have already received the project. Other groups, I will share the project this week. I am actually right now in traveling. That's why I did not take the meeting over there. So I'm going to shift to LPU tonight or tomorrow morning. And once I'm there, I'm comfortable there. I got my accommodation over there. Then we will start working properly on those projects. Perfect. Thank you so much, guys. Bye, everyone. Bye, everyone. Text me on my WhatsApp, Akash. We will see if we can fit you in any group. Okay. Thank you, guys. Bye, everyone. Good night. Bye. Not good night, but have a great day ahead. Bye. Because I'm going to teach. I have to take a batch there, Sakib. So I'm taking a placement batch there for MERN. So I have to travel there today or tomorrow for a month. Thank you, guys. Bye, everyone. Bye.